Boyo fucking alert. Boyo alert. We're here to talk about the Bible. And this is simply a live stream, and it will be a solo live stream. There will be no other characters appearing in this digital space. It will just be me and you people. And I'm going to expand on a video I made a couple of days ago. I was asked to expand on it, and I actually really want to, because I think there's so much to talk about this. I think this is an incredible angle to hit some of the problems I've been discussing in this channel, such as the unifying Jungian theology and Christianity, and even messing around with paganism and stuff like that. And it comes around this idea that the Bible is real. Now, obviously, the Bible is real. It's a big chunk of paper. Like, you can pick it up, you can use it and read it and all that. But we've kind of we condition ourselves to sort of think that the Bible is a fiction, and something you can do comparative mythology with. You could fictionally grab the Bible and look at Norse mythology and look at all these other mythologies and say, yeah, they're all just metaphors. There's sort of the Jordan Peterson reading of the it's sort of a Jordan Peterson reading of the Bible, as if it's like, oh, it's all about psychological stuff. And I was I started off as a young man being completely atheistic, and then I moved more into this idea of Joseph Campbell, Jordan Peterson way of looking at the Bible, being like they're psychological metaphors for growth. And then the other day I hit upon something unbelievable. Now this freaked me out, because this is big. Like, this is a big fucking deal. The more I've dug into it, it's really, really confused me. I don't really know what to make about it. And there is a hidden message in Genesis, and I'll read it out to you now. It's man. So you get this series of names at the very, very start, which is the genealogy. Genesis 5. It goes from Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. And when you change those names into Hebrew and read through that message, you get man-appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring the despairing comfort. Now, that's very, very strange, because it's got like a unified message written in those names, and that message itself predicts Jesus's ministry. Which is very that's a very difficult thing for me to latch onto. It's like, what? Are you telling me that the Jews who wrote this 2,000 years ago had somehow seen the future about Jesus? Like, how does that work? That is so astoundingly accurate. Like for example, Jordan Peterson often bangs on about Nietzsche being a genius for predicting the death of God would cause communism. Nietzsche called that maybe 40 years before Hitler, 40 years before Marx and all that, or before the Soviet Union and all that. We're talking thousands of years. The Bible is predicting probably the single biggest cultural event that ever happened, especially for Europeans, and that is the arrival of Christ and the creation of the Christian movement. Like, it's unbelievable how big of a deal that is for these guys to call this. And so, like, looking on that first, you're like, Jesus, them fucking Jews, they're geniuses. But I was looking into it more. The more I explore it, the more I see the way this thing fractals into some extremely interesting ideas. One of them is that was it necessarily the actual writers themselves? Because it's often said that the Bible was written by many different people, and so what they did is they all like put together these stories, and they might have even inherited these stories, because this is from Genesis. They might have inherited these stories and then shaped it together, and so it's not really like an individual that did this. So this means it's almost like a collective group. And what's so weird about that is that means that the collective somehow organized these stories to make this message out. It's like the collective formed together like an ant farm, and somehow created a meme system that could predict the future. So it's a piece, like, their group effort was more intelligent independently and could see the future. It was more intelligent than the individuals who made it up. Like, that is just unbelievably astounding, because right there you're in a realm where you're talking about a superhuman intelligence. Now maybe it's just the collection of these Hebrews. They weren't even Jews actually back then. They're Hebrews. It's just a collection of these Hebrews who figured this out. They were like, all right, we'll collect these stories, and these stories had an intelligence in them. So you've got this like this is where Jung would come in. You've got this collective dream, and this collective dream has intelligence wrapped up inside it. And that's absolutely insane. So that's like what is going on there? How the hell does that even work? So you've got this intelligent thing going on, this group meme going on, and it's after coding a message into this tradition, and this message was predictively historically accurate in its predictions. That is so crazy. I don't know what to make of that at all. So give an example how I'm working this around my mind is that the Bible obviously was real to some extent. It's like it's evidentially real. You can actually to some extent fail test it. There's many reasonings why this might have happened that might reduce the fantasy of what I'm talking about here, but nonetheless this prediction is there at the start and it comes true. So that's just absolutely flooring. It's unbelievable. I don't know what to make of that at all. And damn, I lost my train of thought. The thing that would be going on there. Yes, the way I think about this is Kekistan. I was talking to James about this before. What happened with Kekistan during the Trump election with Pepe and all that shit was there was a lot of people on the interwebs, and they were just sitting there and they were just like being like, oh, fucking Hillary. And not even Hillary. They were like being like, oh, fucking, globalists and the system and all that stuff. And they didn't really have any power. So you have the sense that you have that PC culture that's all strict, and it's like, this is how the world, this is what you can't talk about, and this is the way you have to be serious and all that stuff. And humor always revolves around the idea of boundaries. So you have this is the way you're supposed to talk about things, and then the instinct for humor would obviously just start prodding at that, and then that instinct for humor would go on 4chan and start to create that subculture of memes where it's like, all right, the mainstream media throws up the kind of the normie think, which is like, oh, poor refugees, crises and all this, and then these guys just ripping the piss. It's almost like the trickster had possessed them, starts to paint over memes on top of these things, and you start getting this new story, the Kekistan, the Pepe story that is getting written over that. And it's almost like, it's not like there's one individual in 4chan that was being like, yes, this is how we strategically attack their narrative with memes. It was almost like there was this instinct inside the people as a whole that were doing this, and they're allowing themselves to be led by this instinct, and therefore they were actually achieving something, being guided by an energy that they all shared. And so when you abstract the energy out of the group, you have an intelligent energy. And what's so crazy about this as well is that Kekistan thing probably had a measurable effect on the result of that election. Like, Trump barely won that election, and you have to put some of that down to the internet subculture that was going on. Like, even the Democrats like condoned it as Nazism to try frame it as something that shouldn't be paid attention to. They were trying to block it out because they recognized it as a threat. And so a group of random uncoordinated individuals were trusting their instincts towards humor, and it's like the instinct of humor itself that lived outside of them and actually organized this subculture and had a measurable effect on history. That is so crazy. That is so crazy, because we're instantly in the realm of transhuman intelligence affecting us through ideas. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. You're talking about like a higher dimensional. It's like there's so many leaps we have to take here, but we have to imagine that the imagination is like tuning into this frequency zone of like an information world, and that's where all the memes live. And in some way, we think that we contribute to the memes, but it seems that this actually works the other way around if we're looking at it this way. And so when you're like, pulling a funny, when you're being humorous and all that shit, you're attaching, it's almost like that's a portal for the god of the trickster to come in, and then he can decide what he makes you. It's like it's working the other way around. This higher consciousness thing is this higher frequency thing, this other imagination world thing is actually controlling you to an extent, or putting ideas into your head and leading you. So it's like this is the architect up here, and this is above humanity. And so this is what went on in the Kekistan thing. And it's like, you can legit look this shit up. You can see it grow. It starts with a load of people just being like, like Kek and Pepe and all that shit. And then as it grows, it becomes really coherent, and you get this huge Middle Eastern narrative of Kekistan, Kukistan, Normistan, and then the evil, Hillary-faced helicopters coming in and shooting people and shit. It's amazing how that works. And this is Jung's notion of the collective unconscious, the meme space that is so dominant, the meme space that Jung would suggest the archetypes live, and these archetypes, I guess this is the big deal. I'm now starting to think that these archetypes have an intelligence of their own that is beyond us. And I don't know how to reduce that, because all this evidence that we're starting to hit on is starting to suggest that it's there. And so if you've got the trickster god that was controlling Kekistan, what the fuck was controlling the Bible? Like, how does that work? Like, how did a group of Hebrews follow an instinct where they're like truth or meaning, and they follow that instinct? What happens when they start getting messages back? Is that what happened? You had this higher meme space intelligence. I don't know what it is. It's like obviously fucking God. That's what they're calling it. And it writes a message in the fucking names of the lineage. Like, it's not like that can be really well strategized either. Like, I imagine a lot of that stuff would have been quite historical as well. And so they've got this sequence of names, and this meme thing puts in a message. And so with the idea is like, all right, I'll study deeply into this. And then they study deeply, they open it up, and they discover that them just following their instincts and sort of, you can imagine maybe the Bible was written inspired, as they say. So what's that like? You go into like the same way as the Kekistan 4chan guys would go into like a derp trance where they'll be like, this is funny. They're not really logically thinking it out. They're not being like, they're just trusting their gut. They're being like, the feeling, when something's funny. It's not like a logical thing. It's just like, it gives you that kick. So they're following that. So were these Hebrews, were they just following, were they sort of getting into a trance, following a meaningful trance? They're almost like, yes, enchanted. They're speaking in tongues type situation. Is that how these things would have worked? The story would just make sense or move you in a certain way. And so all these guys would be doing this for 1,000 years. And then suddenly, when you look at this story that they incubated out of it, and it's not like a logically put together thing, it's very much something they trusted their emotions with. There's a fucking message there hidden in it. But what the fuck is that supposed to mean? That is crazy. So does that mean that the thing, just like Kekistan had an organizing force that was beyond humanity, there was an organizing force behind the Bible that was beyond the people writing it, and it wrote a message? Is that what is happening there? Is that a God speaking to us? And what was the message it put there? The message is no fucking joke. I'll read it again because more people have come on. Hello, people, by the way. Boyo fucking alert. The message says, man has been appointed mortal sorrow. So like, why the fuck would you write a Bible? It's like, why am I suffering and dying? It's so shit down here. And the message goes, man appointed mortal sorrow. That's not gibberish, That's not trivial. That's exactly saying, this is your situation. You're in a bad spot. And then the second half of the message is, the blessed God shall come down teaching, his death shall bring the despairing comfort. And what was Jesus? What was Jesus all about? Jesus came down and said, I will die, and this will redeem you all, and you will conquer death. It's like exactly what was going on there. That is so crazy. It's so crazy. And it happened as well. And like, we can reduce this and say, oh, fuck it, we'll get into the reductions later, but that is such a big deal because it seems like it was getting organized by something higher. Now, what that thing was, obviously you have to default to God because that's what the Bible says it is. But the other sides of it are, Jung could say it's the self, the really high abstracted force that organizes the collective unconscious. But that is God anyway. But that's sort of what we're getting at here. We're getting at this, some type of superordinate force that's bigger than humanity. This is where things get fucking weird, man, because now we're dealing with concepts that are suggesting intelligence beyond us and bigger than us. And these intelligences can see, they can see time beyond three dimensions. They can see like fifth dimensional time, and they can write down in our fucking books and say this is what will happen in 2000 years after this is written. So many crazy thoughts going into that. And look, you might be saying, yeah, it's just a message, like, stuff like that can happen. And I'm like, yeah, sure, it can. But this isn't just something that's just popped in there. It's not like God just said, or like maybe just some cheeky, smart Hebrew said, all right, I'll just write this in to fuck with everybody's head for a bit. And each of these names specifically coordinate to a passage in the Bible, like Methuselah, which is broken up into three words, which means death shall bring or send forth. His death shall bring. Okay, Methuselah is one of I can't remember whose son it was. Methuselah's father was given a prophecy of the coming great flood, that was Noah's flood, and was apparently told that as long as his son was alive, the judgment of the flood would be withheld. But as soon as he died, the flood would be brought or sent forth. So this guy's death meant the start of the great flood that ruined everything. And so we have this guy's name actually meaning something in terms of the bigger picture of the big story. And Noah, of course, comfort Noah. Noah was a savior in that type of sense as well. So we have all of these things. Adam, man, is the start. We have all of these things like being part of quite a big contingent. It's not like it was just, all right, we'll just write this in. It was quite sophisticatedly written in. It was written in deeply in the fabric. And so there's this amazing organizing power in these stories and in these things. And it's hard to, I find it hard to attribute this to just some Hebrew or even a group of Hebrews who figured it out. Like, they were smart enough to get in touch with this, but could they really figure this out so well? It absolutely blows my mind. And then, like, I guess what I'm fronting here is like, is this evidence for God? Is this evidence that you can speak to a higher power, as higher power speaks to you? Like, there's so many things that this opens up. It's like, what are we accessing through our imagination? Like, like, once you accept that first principle, that it seems like the Bible had coded in it something transhuman, beyond human in intelligence, it opens up so many cans of worms. Does that mean that the Bible is legit? Does that mean that everything the Bible says is real? That's a scary problem. Because if they were accurate about this prediction, the coming of Christ, massive historical event, that's no fucking joke. Is the Bible accurate about the coming of the Antichrist? And you could say, for example, I'll try Steelman, I'll try break this apart. You could say, okay, look, they wrote that prediction, that prophecy at the start of the Bible. And so what happened is the people who understood the Bible wanted to fulfill this. And for that reason, that's why it got fulfilled. So they wanted to fulfill this because it was written in their code. It's not reality. It's sort of like a mental reality shared among humans. That's possible, right? It's being very reductionistic here. And so Jesus was well known to actually know the Bible inside out. And he speaks a lot about the idea of him being the fulfillment of prophecies. Jesus's ministry, the whole idea was, it was like, I'm the Messiah. I am fulfilling all these patterns that the Bible opened up. This is my proof. And like, this would be obviously the very first example of an open prophecy. And it was closed with Jesus. Jesus says, so here I am. I'm filling all these prophecies. I'm going to die on the cross, blah. Everything's going to work out this way. So it's like, it's all getting fulfilled. Maybe it's because all these guys made these random predictions that Jesus was just smart enough to figure them all out and say, right, I'll just do that and everything will go well. Like, that's possibly what happened. That's a big leap, though. Like, you're being so reductionistic there that you're actually taking a leap to say that Jesus was a super genius nonetheless, to figure out to do all this and have that massive an impact. It's very astounding, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And now we're in a problem, because since we've sort of accepted that the Bible has that effect, and we have all these world leaders reading the Bible and looking at Revelations, like, does that mean the Antichrist is coming? Like, it's like, what happens now? The next biggest historical event after Jesus is the end, Judgment Day. Like, Jesus even talks about the Judgment Day a shitload as well. They keep hammering throughout the Bible, the day of judgment, the day of redemption will come. And so, like, if they're that adamant and accurate in predicting Jesus, and maybe it is just some type of psychological effect, does this mean that the end of the Bible is legit? Because you can't take these things on half measure. Like, it's either if there's somehow transpersonal, superhuman forces writing this fucking book, then how it must be right. Like, you have to follow those conclusions to their natural end, and you're like, holy shit. So they're suggesting an antichrist. Is that back in the table? Is God back in the table? Is a higher power back in the table? The modern way of looking at the world says that there's no higher power, and you're not supposed to look at that. You're supposed to say, oh, it's not real. It's like, wait a second, what was guiding those people, and what makes us think that's vanished? Have we just lost touch with that? Has that thing still there? The hope? That's just such a crazy thought, man. That's such a crazy thought. And this is a crazy thought, because this is not something where I have to be like, you have to take this on faith. This is now causing me a huge amount of cognitive dissonance. I'm literally lathering my reality in this shit. It's ripping me in half, because this is not on faith. This is evidentially there. It's not a joke. It's not like, oh, floozy at all. This is pretty fucking hard. This is fairly solid evidence, and it's scary. You don't know what to make of this shit. Very hard to figure out. I'm going to check some comments before I keep on ranting, because I've plenty more to say. 1 second, people. How are you, by the way? It's afternoon over here in Ireland. I hope all is well. And yeah, we'll go more into Bible prophecy, because that's always fun. Oh, be to the Lord. Oh, be to Jesus Christ. Loads of comments. Love the new channel name. Thank you. If the Bible is real, you have to stop being degenerate. See, that's my fucking problem. I'm literally like, please don't let it be real, because then I'll have to stop being degenerate. Solifida, bro. Found you because of your Ion videos. Enjoy your stuff. Thank you very much, Babby Joe. Jesus Christ be praised. The damn fucking straight. I'll get into Jesus a little bit more now. No more picking up roasties with boyfriend. This is why I'm fucking scared, man. For those who don't know the Pepe Faith story, check that out, guys, in the link. It's there. Love the connection between the collective unconscious memes and the Bible. This is exactly, Babby Joe, how are you doing? This is exactly what I'm getting at. The idea that Jung was hammering on, the idea of the self, and Jung believed in God. The idea that Jung was hammering on, the idea of the self, is so close to God when you start to think of it as the idea of an organizing force that is is hyperdimensional. Oh my God, it's so crazy. It's a hyperdimensional force, meaning that it's a force that operates in our imaginative space, in our meme space, as opposed to our Earth tactile space. It's like we think God is dead. We think the heavens are empty, and what that means is that it's almost like nothing has any consequence. But then if we start to accept that there is something like a self, even just an organizing meme force that organized the Bible enough to leave a fucking message that was historically accurate. Oh my, such a huge idea. If we're willing to accept that, we have to accept that this intelligent thing that's only one aspect of it that we understand. How much more? That's a creator. That's a creative being doing a creative act. How far do you take that idea? Like, is that the rediscovery of the God? Like, it's so big. It's such a big idea. What's even weird about this is this is at the start of the Torah. So this grates on Jewish people a lot, because this says Jesus returns. This fronts the Messiah as what Jesus did, which was to die for the sins. And so this is probably why it's not widely talked about, is because it's probably grating on the sister religion, shall we say. Back to the comments. The Whopper Nation, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost control it. Obviously, yes, that's what I'm getting at here. Is I'm California Lewis. I'm a fundamentalist. I think the Bible is very straightforward. Yeah, like, I'm starting to get at that. But see, this is my problem here. All right, and I'm going to throw out a really harsh, fucking jarring problem. Is that if we accept that the Bible was being coordinated by a collective higher intelligence, just like fucking Pepe was getting coordinated by the trickster, we have to accept almost everything in the Bible on merit, we have to start saying, okay, well then Revelations is real, and then the Book of Daniel is real. I think the Book of Daniel is a predictive book that predicts essentially the Revelations. Then Jesus' suggestions about the end of time are real. Here's another fucking problem. Here's a big problem. Genesis, I think it could be 1. And God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. The waters were the heavens and the waters were the earth. And God made the firmament, the dome, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. God called the firmament heaven. So you're trying to tell me now that we have to take flat earth serious because it's in the Bible? Because if the Bible is organized by a collective unconscious force, and it seems like it was, why should we throw, we can't just throw out parts of it. Like, we have to take it all serious, don't we? And so do we have to do that? We have to be like, oh fuck, okay, well, we live in a flat earth. We, at the very least, we got to stop being mean to those guys. And then the next one is like, is there an anti? This also means that there's another problem, is that if there's a God, then the fucking motherfucker they're warning you about throughout the Bible, that there's a spiritual force which is evil, Satan, exists too, and he's about to give birth to his son, which is the Antichrist, and we're like, you know, Revelations is going to come true, and all that stuff is back in the table, and that all of a sudden things are just a lot more complicated because you're adding in a spiritual dimension, and then all of a sudden we have an artifact that seems to be created by this spiritual dimension. It's so crazy, so crazy. I'm a fundamentalist. Just Yahweh speaking to his people. Yeah, this is what I'm getting at. Have we done Matthew? I think you're onto something. There is a co-creation space between man and God. It's the unconscious. I would say that, like, by definition, the unconscious is the place that you cannot see. It's impossible to see. Like, that's what it means. You're not conscious of it, right? And so we often think of that as like beneath. We think of like unconscious stuff as, you know, repressed sexual desires, as Freud framed it. But to be unconscious of higher dimensions, and mathematics, many scientists now are pretty straightforward in the idea that there are 10 dimensions, possibly even more. And so they're suggesting that there are other aspects of reality that we're not conscious of. We can't perceive them. And so unconscious is not only lower, like sexual desires and like psychological shit beneath you, but unconscious also means higher. So there's probably a bigger world that we're actually not conscious of. And the problem with that is that if you accept that premise, what the fuck's in that bigger world? Is that what's happening when the artist goes really far out into the imagination? Is that what happened to Nietzsche when Nietzsche got his little hammer and started plugging away at God is dead? And then crack, he opens up the hyperdimension and it pours into him and breaks him, and he's stuck in a stupor for 10 years. Like, maybe it's bullshit that he had syphilis. Maybe that's what happened. Because if we're saying we're unconscious of this bigger realm, and somehow this bigger realm can't speak to us, and we have proof now, and things like the Bible, there are artifacts that seem like they do that. Man, like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck's, like, it's big ideas. Jesus also performed heavenly miracles beyond what can be explained by literary analysis of the Old Testament. Yeah, like, I think Jesus is an amazing person. Religion in Ireland is looked down on. Also, our language, boyo, it's fucking true. Yeah. It's interesting what happened to Ireland recently, because we were very, very pious, very pious, and we've now gone like anti-pious. And it's so strange, because Ireland is in this position when we used to be extremely religious, and now we're representative of the modern anti-religious mindset. And what's really strange is that, since I'm saying you're putting all this stuff in the Bible back in the table, the whole premise towards changing Ireland was about putting the Bible off the table and saying it's just another piece of fiction that's relative to all other mythological stories. But now we have to start asking the question of, okay, this becomes hard now. If this being that spoke historical fact to the Hebrews at the start of the Bible is real, which, like, we almost have to accept that on premise. We don't know what it is, but, like, you know, we're going with God, but we could say the self of the collective unconscious. I gave it an accurate message. We have to take everything serious. And so what it said was that the Jews were the chosen people to bring forth the truth for that ion. And then Jesus closed that covenant and started a new one where everybody was going to get the truth through Jesus. And so if this God told them that this historical thing would happen with Jesus, and said, Jews, look, you've been good to me. I'm going to sort you out for the next 1,000 years, and then I'll bring you the Messiah. And then, oh God, look, you deny him, so now he's going to have to tell the whole world like what's the story is. And so he chose them, said, all right, you're going to be my vehicle for bringing in morality. And he did that. And then Christ came, and then, all right, Christ was the completion of that. And now Christ is the vehicle for morality. That's not relative. That's not saying all religions are right, like we're supposed to think. That's saying that all religions are wrong, except for this one, because this is the only one that spoke through. Because that's what God says. Now, that's a difficult problem too. That's an unbelievably difficult problem, because now we're supposed to hammer on the idea that we have to take everything in the Bible serious. That's like flat Earth is on the table, the coming of the Antichrist, the existence of the God of this world, Satan, and of course the shall we say the strictness of the position of Christianity as the only true path, as Jesus says. It's like you can only get to God through me. Like that's an incredibly strange problem. It's an incredibly strange problem, and Jesus sort of said, the whole revelation stuff will happen after the world has had the opportunity to hear the gospel. Like it'd be unfair to judge people who haven't had the chance to hear the gospel. But now we're in that position where the world has heard the gospel, and everybody's put staked their claim to what they're going to stand by. And yeah, it's just a very strange problem. And then we have, of course, all of that idea of like we're losing our religion, and like what does that mean? It's very strange. I'll go back to these. I'll send you something a PhD Jungian wrote about synergy in scripture. I think you're dead on. I have almost had the exact same thoughts. Thank you, sir. Yes, they're very strange thoughts. You cannot know the mind of God. Yes, I absolutely agree. We can definitely read his messages though. Corinthians 2:11. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of a man, which is in him? Damn. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of man, which is in him? Even so, the things of God knoweth no man, but the Spirit of God. Bobby Joe. Check out the Dead Sea Scrolls. Matthew. Jesus was either a socialist or a communist. I don't think that's true, actually. I think Jesus, for example, I used to think that. See, this is the other problem with the whole Ireland's a good case study, is that the idea of us losing our religion also meant this weird bastardization of the Christian tradition. Like Christianity is pretty, this is what I mean, it's pretty dogmatic in that Jesus is the only path. It doesn't say like, comparative religious relativism. It doesn't say that, even though that's what we're told it means. Jesus wasn't a nice guy. Like he came, said, I do not come bringing a message of peace. I come with the sword. Like that was his deal. Like obviously he was all about healing the sick and all that, but he's very strict in his judgments. There is a very clear sense of right and wrong, and he takes spirituality extremely serious, and he's very, very jarring and combative with the Pharisees, who were the Jewish leaders at the time that ended up condemning Jesus to death. So there's I feel that weirdly these things might have been changed quite a lot. It's strange. Yes, about the Nietzsche thing. Yeah. I'm thinking more and more about Nietzsche now. Like, I don't know. I like the guy, but it's weird figuring out what happened to him. Well, Satan is, at least per the Old Testament, just the adversary and the prosecutor of God's court. Can there be any growth in a game without an opponent, or without suffering failure and then self-overcoming? As the way I understand Satan's a hard one, because they call him the god of this world. And it's almost like he's the one who owns the keys to this world, and that it's a tragedy nearly. But there's also another frame where you can put Satan as a sort of deceiver, like a virus. It doesn't really have any real power in the world, but he can capture on people. And it's like, why is he there? This is the problem of evil. This is the problem with God, is that people hypothesize, well, if he's all powerful, why does Satan exist? And the Book of Job is an attempt to remedy this. The idea is Satan is there to test Job, to see is Job morally worthy, and we're kind of running into this idea. But this is just my own musings. It's not what I think Scripture says. I don't really know Scripture that well. Is that we are sort of in this petri dish where God is trying to incubate a high quality product, if you will, and Satan is sort of like that test. And whoever gets drawn to Satan, God's going to throw them out in the dustbin come Revelations. So we'll see what happens there. William Arkell, I will check him out. Preterism in regards to New Testament prophecy. I do not know who that is. I found your channel a few days ago. The content I've seen so far is great. I like this meme Bible idea as well, and I'd love for you to keep exploring this idea. I most certainly will. Like it's so huge that it astounds me. I don't think I've even begun to crack the surface, but I really need to hammer on the idea that there's only one principle that changes everything. It's one leap. It's simply one ideological leap. Well, I guess there's two. There's two steps. First of all, we got to admit that there is a frequency above us, which is the imagination, and it's almost like this river full of memes, and these memes are all flowing. And when an artist or a writer or someone who's getting a spiritual experience cracks into that, they start to experience that. And that's that feeling of your imagination getting set on light. And so that meme world, it's like the information space is real. We got to make that assumption. It's not a hard one to make. I think people generally assume that now. Now, the big leap is that some of these memes are conscious in the same way as we think of ourselves as conscious, like actors. Yes, some of these memes are acting, and this is what this suggests. That this is like the idea of a message being written at the start of the Bible is proof of that. It's like these memes seem to be doing something. Now, to what extent they're conscious, I don't fucking know, or intelligent or whatever, but they seem to be doing something that's beyond just the individuals who made up the original writers or storytellers of the Bible. It seems to be something hyper-human. It's astounding, it's astounding. And that big leap puts too much stuff on the table, because that's what the spiritual world was. It's a hyperdimensional thing. And this is even crazier. The Hebrews who wrote the Bible hypothesized 10 dimensions long before the scientists figured it out. So these guys were onto something. Like they knew something, like big stuff. But nonetheless, that big leap of the imagination world, which Jung calls the unconscious, but more so the collective unconscious, the meme world, living memes. Like, what the fuck do you make about that? Because then you've got Satan and God, and then like the heavenly world is real. And Nietzsche's whole premise is that there is no other world and all that. And suddenly, like, everything he said is wrong. So suddenly all of 20th and 21st century philosophy is wrong. Postmodernism is taking a serious hit here. Jordan Peterson has got to stop saying there's two truths, guys. It's loads of stuff changes if we accept these premises. And the thing is, you're not allowed to accept these premises in the modern world. You can't say that there's a meme world and there's a living entity in there. It's like that's not falsifiable nor scientific, but this indicates that we need to start looking at it. Yes, thank you. Hammertown wins. And Shadowfire was the other comment I was reading. Regards to New Testament prophecy, take a more nuanced view where the Bible was a correlation of a higher entity interacting with Bronze Age people and their limitations. Yeah, I'll have to look into that, because I want to make this as reductionist as possible, just for the intellectual argument. It's very interesting though. It's really cool, but it could be just that. It could be a group of people tapped into the imagination world, and then like it's sort of suggesting that when a group of people organize well enough to tap into the imagination world, they find the gods and they appear to them as they do, and then those gods lead them in a certain direction. It's like all the natural instincts to life. You're still suggesting an organizing force beyond a people. That's still an astounding idea, but nonetheless, that takes perhaps the Jews off the pedestal and the Christians off the pedestal, and puts it more at this idea that everybody could tap into this, and all the traditions around the world have achieved this to some extent. But still, we there's a lot to explore before we make those conclusions. They're just the problems. Jesus was also whipped the money changers and threw their tables over. Yeah, he was a fucking ruthless boyo, like ruthless boy, proper boyo. Like I say, be great crack. Matchun. What do you think of the Tuatha De Danann? Well, as I said, when a group of people tap into the the collective unconscious, I imagine they can start tapping into these figures, these living memes, as I'm describing them, and very powerful energetic forces, such as the idea of beauty, which is represented as Aphrodite for the Greeks, or Eru or Falda for the Irish, and And so if you tap into the idea of war, you'd get Aries. But the Irish would tap into the idea of, well, the Gaels would have tapped into the idea of Neat, and it's that they're popping into this space as well. And I guess that's what the Tuatha De Danann is. And this is why I'm starting to think that paganism might be real, but it's lower down in the hierarchy. I think what Christianity seems to just suggest is that, okay, paganism was perceiving these forces, but these forces weren't the ultimate truth, the ultimate force, the organizing force at the top of it all. Young self, these were more like, lower forms like anima and animus, or synergy, like, or the shadow. It was lower forms. So that you tap into those, you find the gods. And then Jesus was saying, I come from the original creator, the one who started the whole show, and this is his plan. And the thing about the original creator is he fucking wrote messages to us in this book that we've kept for thousands of years, and he has a plan. And then bang, suddenly you're right there in an amazing place. This is why I think this is such a big deal. It's why I'm expanding on it so much. Is like, if you take, like, it really puts all the stuff that's not on the table back on the table. And it's not a trivial evidence point. I think it's a big evidence point. I think people seriously need to sit down and try wrestle with this, because this is not a joke. This is so huge. It's like finding the first dinosaur bone. I'm actually, like, I sound a little bit arrogant there. I'm not saying I found this at all. No way. I'm saying that it's like there, and I just can't believe anybody's not talking about it. Like, what the fuck? Like, this should be like, yeah, this should be like taught in schools. It's like, we don't know what to do about this weird sentence. Like, there's this weird fucking sentence, and we're supposed to do this curriculum where it's like, Buddhism and all these other religions, but there's this weird sentence in the Bible that's fucking our heads up, and it's, I don't know, man. I don't know. So, yeah, there's that. Satan is the god of this world. Remember, Satan offered Jesus the entire world. Jesus never denied that Satan had the world to give him. It's true. That's my problem. It's like, if we're accepting a higher creative forces there, well, then we have to accept that the owner of this world is evil. Jesus and the Bible are real, mate. Time to repent. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, the sinner, and say this and turn away from the sins. I mean it, and you'll be saved, lad. Thank you, California Lewis. I most certainly have spent. I've noticed that when I've crawled into the idea of absolute evil, and been, like, bringing forth the idea of, like, getting gotten by Satan, I always call out to Jesus. So no matter what I'm intellectualizing here, I think my soul belongs in his hands. Peterism is the theological position that all or most of New Testament prophecies have already occurred. Excellent thoughts as usual from you today. Thank you, Shadowfire. Thank you. Interesting. So all the prophecies have occurred. Tuatha De Danann means tribe of Dan. Yeah, I would imagine that the tribe of Dan would have been a set of original people, and then they would have got imprinted on the mythological consciousness and moved into, as history lost touch with them, they would have turned into like dream ideas of sorts. So it's very interesting to me, that thing. I know it's a long shot, but if you study the Book of Mormon canon, technically when the Bible was written, it was at the close of an ion, and the Book of Mormon was a further clarification. They seem to suggest many of the books come along and new information is learned at each ion in reference to God. Yeah. Like, all of this stuff I'm going to have to look into more seriously now. I don't really understand Mormonism at all. But yes, it's that would make sense to me. That would, like as the ions move, God sends messages through the poets and the prophets. Like, they're all the same thing pretty much. And I have no idea what religion I am. I'm not even sure if I stick with it. Like, I'm pretty much a Christian at this point. It's more like my heart resonates with Jesus, but Nietzsche fucked me up. So Nietzsche almost is such a brilliant writer that he's almost ruined my ability to take any religion seriously, and worst of all, Christianity. He has literally a book called The Antichrist, where he literally pulls the guts out of Christianity, and it's very, very hard to take it serious. And call your local pastor. Many of the religious people I've spoken to, just can't articulate it to my head. And I'm weird. I'm very conflicted. Like, I guess this is the therapy lesson now, but it's almost like my head can't be convinced, but my heart is already made its decision. and Nietzsche is a philosopher, and he check out my channel. Go into my homepage, cycle down to you'll see Nietzsche. He's a German chap, and you can pop into a playlist there, and it's pretty much one of his books called The Genealogy of Morals, which he says that all Christian values were essentially a false rationalization. Um, oh, you're studying to be a pastor. God, all right. See, I'm reading all these different comments. Yeah, like I find it hard to get convinced. Like Peterson was a big deal for me because he was at least taking this realm serious. You know what I mean? Like I had all these thoughts about this stuff, and um, I was reading Jung and all that shit, and then Peterson comes along and says this stuff's real, and now I'm at this point where I'm sort of moving even deeper into the idea of what is real and whatnot. Yeah, so that'll be my spin on this. The Book of Mormon is bullshit. They declare Jesus and strand of brothers, and they have tiered heaven and planet, blah blah blah. Yeah, yeah. Um, there's a YouTuber called Enlighten, might be of interest to you, given he references Jung a lot in his discussion on Jesus and other religions. I'll check him out. Thank you, sir. Enlighten, enlighten. Um, Irish paganism. See, I like paganism as well. I like Irish paganism. I think it decorates the lower tier gods and memes, but I think the higher meme seems to be Christian in its essence. And I don't see how placing Odin or Dagda on the top of the pedestal works in any way, because Christianity seemed to have done that more successfully. And there's a problem here, is because, as I said before, maybe all cultures tapped into this collective space and got in contact with the creator. But for some reason, the Jews outlasted it because they wrote it down. It's because they were just like, all right, we're going to make sure we're going to fight. They do it even nowadays. They fight to preserve their culture properly. They're very, very diligent for doing that. And so they managed to strive it out. And that's why the prophecies come from them. Christianity comes from them. But that could mean that maybe all these other religions were on the path towards that. They were like, the Norse and the Irish would have been more barbaric, and that's a good thing in some senses. Like, it makes them more healthy. Like, Jews are considered physically inferior to many of these like northern cults and whatnot, but the northern cults would be more like in touch with the forest and less sophisticated and even less rational to an extent. And so they would have lost their cultures, and they might have got to these highest levels because their systems are incredibly sophisticated and seem real to me. There seems to be something powerful about the meme side of this stuff with these guys, but they it's almost like they fail to get to the big stuff, which is absolute evil. But see, Norse paganism, Irish myth, we don't have the end of times and the beginning of times, but Norse paganism pretty much hits Ragnarok, like they're talking about revelations and all that shit. And they have a prophecy for that. So we've got like a very difficult conflict here, as being like, what were they tapping into? Are they perhaps hitting, like, how much was the Torah and Christianity politicized? This is a problem I have. This is something like, and this is actually a really hard problem, is that, like, and this is something Nietzsche points out that makes it really hard for me to fully go all in intellectually into this stuff, is that if these sects were politicized as tools, like, there may be parts of it may be lies. Do you know what I mean? The same way as you sort of have the modern Zionist movement seems to be a very politicized way of reading the Bible. And it's strange. It's hard to know what to do with that. The same way as people might take the Quran and politicize it in order to decide. You don't know how much of it is brainwashing. So it takes a while to get through it all, because everybody would have an incentive to brainwash, to use these things to brainwash. And so you sort of see my conflict there. I've got that paganism thing, and then, like, the cherry on top is, of course, Christianity. It seems to hit in the right place. It gets everything in a good spot, but there's still these sort of blank holes. There is a Jungian who wrote about Jung's ideas in the Book of Mormon. That is what I will be sending you. It's just interesting, not trying to convert. I'll become a Mormon now. That'll be my next one. It's like Bobby Joe made me Mormon. And interesting enough, that YouTuber, a practicing Christian, even did a recent video on Odin. Yeah, like even if like I would put myself as Christian, but I do think I do think that doesn't put paganism off the table. Like the Irish successfully united Christianity and paganism, and I'm starting to look into that more. Hammer Town wins. If you want to DM me, go to Twitter and look for at Stefan Fox, STEFFOX, or Serious Boyo. That will get you there as well. And I should have my DMs open there. If not, just write me a comment on Twitter and I'll open my DMs. The paganism is cat memes, Christianity is Pepe. I'm starting to get that a bit. I think like a lot of people who get into paganism, or it's like someone told me before, LARPing, and there is that feel about it. It's like you know, if a gun was to your fucking head, would you call out to Odin? I don't think so. You'd call out to Jesus. I get that feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like you call out, you'd be like, God help me. Like it's like it's fun. It's sexy and romantic and colorful. I think that's it. But the problem is that what happens when the question is what's going to happen for your afterlife? Thanks, bro. Yeah, that's the really big question. What's going to happen with your afterlife? Like, which are you going to choose? And so that's what I'm sort of getting at. I think paganism is sort of like the colorful gods of this world, and if you strip that away, you lose a lot. You lose the romance of life. That paganism does really good at articulating like for example, they articulate anger as Nayat and all that, and Ares and Thor. And that's that's brilliant. That's a really cool thing to have. It's very cool for an artist, for example. But Christianity deals with those massive absolutes like afterlife and evil very, very well. Whereas paganism makes evil more relative. But again, Nietzsche gets into that and makes it difficult. So I'm still not completely sure on that stuff. Interesting enough, that YouTuber, blah blah blah, pagan, blah 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 blah, blah Bobby Joe, the Whooper Nation, regardless, is starting to collect some Shadowfire. Another video on how paganism classic simply erred in worshipping the angels as gods instead of the original creator. Yeah, very possible. Very possible. Paganism. I think, as I said before, it's like if we accept there's this magic space, the dream world. When you start looking into that, you'd see the angels first, and as you move higher up, you'll see that behind the angels is God. And so maybe paganism is just a lower perception. And maybe the Jews penetrated so deep because they had a decent culture that was focused on doing that well. And so that's why they were the chosen people. It's like they were sort of the first people to seriously reach there. And or maybe they just preserved their doctrines of reaching there better than everybody else. And then God was like, all right, I'll speak through you. He said, I'm going to send Jesus. Jesus is going to sort everybody out. Bang, Jesus. And then Jesus was like, yep, it's a party around here now. And then Jesus went around, and then everybody was like, we still use the angels. Like, for example, Christianity came to Ireland, and they essentially just took the pagan gods and made them angels. Bridget, for example, Saint Bridget, and stuck them underneath the hierarchy of Jesus. And that was the big thing between the Norse and Christ and the Christians, was Odin was the god versus Christ was the god. And it was like, who's the great king? And there's a lot of problems with this because, yeah, like it's philosophy more. Like, I'm still, to bring it back to the start of this video, like the first principles are fucking huge. Like there is a message in the Bible. Like, I don't think we have that anywhere else. That's quite, yeah, Bridget was a saint, Mr. Coolmug. Sorry, dude. So yeah, like it's yeah, my head's scattered. I'm gonna close this soon. So any last questions, please throw them in. The Martyr Made podcast gives an excellent historical rundown of the Zionist movement. Yes, that's a very interesting movement, to say the least, because it seems like they're trying to invoke the revelation thing. And see, this is, again, it brings us back to that first principle of, okay, if you want to be even reductionist about this, and I think it's a little bit silly, we're saying that some type of prophecy, some type of suggestion appeared at the start of the Bible. And so by the sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, all the motherfuckers who read this were like, well, this is going to happen. So it became a cultural reality. maybe not a real reality, but a cultural reality. So all the Jews read this, and then eventually one of the Jews who had read this stuff said, okay, I'll just make all these patterns work. And that was Jesus. And then bang, you've got like a whole other set of patterns, which is the end of time and judgment. And that's a massive fucking problem, because we've got a large amount of modern people, not just Jews, but like Christians and Jews, who believe all this stuff and are trying to invoke the end of times. And like they're trying to invoke the Zionist movement, trying to reposition Israel so that everything will work out. And like you're again in that problem where it's like, okay, maybe it's only a cultural reality, but it's coming true, and it's coming true so effectively that it kind of astounds you. And then you take those other first principles, like, well, what if there was an organizing force behind it? And you're in a scary place, because then then you've got these movements that are pushing these political agendas. They're sort of contributing to the end of times. Like some of them may even be the satanic movements themselves. And you look at the way the church has crumbled, like that's exactly what seemed to be happening. So there's huge problems. Like this puts you at odds with the modern world, is all I'm saying. And this is not something you can just brush away as folly. This is too big to just brush away as folly. So this is a heavy hitting piece of evidence, and it's floored me. I really don't know what to make of it at all. Well, I do. Like, I hate to recommend normie theologians to an intellectual. Fuck off! I'm not an intellectual. I'm a boyo. That's what I am. Like you, but you should read C.S. Lewis and William L. Craig. Also, the writings of Luther and Augustine. I'm actually going to check out Augustine and C.S. Lewis. Augustine, his name's been popping out to me, so I'll probably get onto him next. A lot of the issues with Christianity was that it overemphasized the transcendent, and the modern rise in paganism had a lot to do with that loss of sacred immanence of God in the world. So this is a big question. We'll get this more in the Ion series, but the death of God, the loss of God, is a very complex problem, because Nietzsche, when he saw the death of God, was looking into this imagination realm that I'm talking about here, and he saw that it's almost like we were going to go blind to this creative force we already had, and that left a problem, a vacuum. And what filled that vacuum seemed to be because we lost the ability. It's almost like this is what happened. Nietzsche was saying that we stopped believing that there was an imagination sphere and other world, and because of that, these memes, these living memes that I'm talking about here, stopped existing to us, because we couldn't see them anymore. Because it was almost like, it's not that even they weren't there, it's just that we weren't looking. People say the death of God, it's like, it's not really that. It's more like God died to us. He died in our imaginations, but it's more the idea that we stopped looking in our imaginations and taking it serious. Like, the imagination turned into the realm of fiction, which is just an astounding idea, because like original fiction writers would have been these Hebrews who would have been writing this stuff about the Bible, and look at lo be the fucking hold, this biblical thing seems to be historically accurate. So that's astounding. And so we stopped believing in this other world, and so we fell out of that, and we stopped seeing it. And what that means is that now we're sort of going back into that other world, and we're repeating the process again. First, we're finding paganism, and some of us are going to start poking past that and saying, well, what about the philosophical absolutes like good and evil, God and Satan? And bang, you're just right back there. Do you think the world will ever end? And what's your thoughts on Tir na Nog? The world will ever end? I do not know, sir. That's a massive question. I would have to go down that route in another stream, perhaps even a book, perhaps even a novel. Your thoughts on Tir na Nog? When I'm talking about the other world, that's actually what Tir na Nog would be a best representation of, is the land of the memes. And you can get caught up there. Same way you can get caught up in a relationship. I think that's what that sort of means. Maybe Oshin went to that place. Jesus said, do not be afraid. I am with you until the end of the world. No need to be scared. God is with you, man. It's the fucking truth. Yeah. Read the KJV. All new Bibles are tampered with. I've noticed that. I have they say they made it into basic English one, and I'm convinced of it. And they come from texts that were found in a waste bin in a monastery. If the word of God wasn't transmitted via the Textus Repsistus, then we are damned. that is the last question, people. I'm going to have to bounce on this because I have a meeting with James. Thank you very much for all tuning in. I hope that cleared up my thoughts. Bope, you'll probably be here later. Tell me what you think, sir. And yeah, that was pretty much the rundown I want to give. Is that like this is no joke. This puts a lot of stuff up on the table, and I like, if you find anything that hammers against this, do. But like, it just seems too big. It's a serious deal, you know. This is it's just big, man. It's just big and astounding and amazing to think about, and it puts a lot of really scary stuff on the table, like evil, dome earth, like dome earth, and the power of God. So I'll talk to you later, people. Thank you very much, and bye, fucking bye. Boyo out. Oh, it's gone dark. Jesus.